In episode 4, you learn that Alina isn't the only one writing letters. Maul has written 3, but he hasn't heard back. And he misses Alina as much as she misses him. So when his commanding officer says that General Kerrigan has offered a trip to the little palace if they can find a stag, and he shows the group a drawing of the stag, Maul knows that it has to do with Alina. He's pretty sure that she actually drew the picture herself. So while everyone's laughing about this mythical animal, Maul says, I'll go, but he won't be going alone because his 2 friends volunteer. They want to keep him company. So the trio track the stag through the snow, and they end up having to go to Fjerda. It's a place that they're not going to be very welcome if they're caught, but they've been able to track the stag over the border, so it's either wait for the stag to come back or go after it. And one night, Maul hears something outside, goes to investigate, but the group is ambushed. And they're able to fight off the initial attackers. But then they hear something in the bushes, and when Maul goes to see what it is, he gets lit up by a Gatling gun. He's hit, he's down, but he's not dead. And as some of the Fjerdans are checking on the group to see if anyone's still alive, he grabs their gun and shoots the rest of them. Unfortunately, his 2 best friends have died in the process. So he's injured, he's far from camp, but then all of a sudden, that's when he sees it, the stag, right in front of him. And this was his mission. He had written all this down in a letter to Alina, that he would do whatever he had to get the stag for her. Now, unfortunately, even though Maul has written those letters, they haven't actually shown up at the palace. And it's got Alina pretty on edge because she figures that Maul might be ignoring her, never once considering that they're just not getting to him. Genya comes in and lets her know that instead of training that day, she's going to be going on a horse ride with General Kerrigan. And that pisses off Alina because she wants to train. She figures the quicker that she can get rid of the fold, the quicker that she can get back to her own life. But Genya points out, this is your life now. It's not all bad news for Alina, though. Genya also tells her that Zoya has been sent away to reassess her priorities. So after giving her this news, Genya shows Alina the outfit that she'll be wearing that day, and it's a black coat. The only one who wears black is Kerrigan. So Alina doesn't want to put it on because she doesn't really want to be associated with that yet. She puts on the blue one, and when she walks outside, Kerrigan's a little puzzled. He says, "Are you so anxious to be like everybody else?" And she admits that it would be nice to know what that feels like someday. The 2 then ride off to a wishing well, where they start discussing how her training's going. But that leads him to telling her how he understands how she feels. When he was a little boy, once he figured out that he was a descendant of the Black Heretic, he came to that very wishing well that they're at and wished every single day to be somebody different. They then go over the story of the Black Heretic because it's carved into the well. Hundreds of years ago, the king hired a Grisha as his military advisor, and that was the Black Heretic. The heretic grew hungry for more power, and the king was fearing a coup. So the king put a bounty on his head and anybody who stood by him. The heretic knew he was outnumbered, so he tried to create an army of his own, but he failed, and instead he created the Fold. Kerrigan tells her how he's always looked at the person to blame, not the solution, even though he's devoted his life to getting rid of the Fold. And that's what Alina is worried about, that she is Kerrigan's solution. But if she fails, everybody will put the blame on her. And Kerrigan says, if you believe anything, believe that I will not let that happen. She heads back into the palace and starts training with Baghra, but she's just not getting it. In one particular training session, Baghra gives her some tea, and she starts to try to conjure the light, but she tells Baghra, I think I need an amplifier. But Baghra says the use of amplifiers is lazy. All of a sudden, though, Alina starts to feel pretty weird because that tea that she drank was laced with something. And it travels back to the memory of her and Maul getting tested. She had always said that they hid, but that wasn't necessarily true. They tried to hide. They were unsuccessful. Maul couldn't get tested because his hand was cut. So Alina, in an attempt to stay with Maul, crushed a piece of broken glass into her hand because the test wouldn't show anything if she was already in pain. That's where the scar on her hand comes from, that moment. That is why they never knew that she was Grisha. Baghra tells her, you protected yourself by denying yourself. And she shoots back, I wasn't thinking of me, I was thinking of him. But Baghra asks, well, where is he now exactly? And that's just a reminder to Alina that, from her point of view, he's ghosted her. That night, she's having trouble sleeping and she starts walking through the palace when she comes across Kerrigan's room and he's overlooking the layout of Rafka. He tells her that their enemies are threatened by her existence. The only problem is Rafka can only stand up to them if they're united. And there's some jagaloon in the West who's saying that the West needs to be their own country. The more and more that Kerrigan talks, the more and more he's getting upset, to the point where Alina grabs his arm, illuminating the room, but tells him, you are not alone. Now, since power is nature's most powerful aphrodisiac, Kerrigan, who told her earlier, hey, you can call me Alexander, starts brushing her hair back, saying things like, I've been waiting a long time for you. Definitely giving off booty call vibes. But Alina, just like Maul, isn't that type of girl, and she leaves for the night, heading back to her room. The next morning, though, when the mail arrives and there isn't a letter from Maul, it's like a final straw for Alina. She's had enough. She's all types of emotional and heads to Bagheera's cave because for whatever reason they set this poor woman up in a cave, but she's able to conjure the light herself. And Bagheera says, okay, now the work begins. When she gets back to her room, she calls for Jenya and she asks her to get rid of the scar from her hand. The reminder of when she decided to stay with Maul, unaware that he has been writing her, but somebody hasn't been delivering the letters. Now, fast forward a little bit to Kaz's group, where they have arrived in East Rafka, but it's going to be tough to find a way to the Sun Summoner without Nina. It's even tougher now because they're having this massive party, so the whole castle is going to be crowded with Second Army people. But Kaz has found out the location of the Little Palace's blueprints. Now all they have to do is get them. And Jesper loves nothing more than a good heist. So Kaz dresses up like a famous artist and heads into the library asking for the blueprints to deliver a massive sculpture, when in reality, he's doing nothing more than casing the place. Later that night, Inej and Jesper break in. Gets a little dicey there for a second, but they're able to duplicate the blueprints and walk out. The only problem is, when they start looking over the blueprints, there's no easy way in. And as the conductor is telling them how this plan probably wasn't going to work, all of a sudden the stage performance from behind gets everybody's attention because one of the performers falls and ends up hurting themselves. But a little while later, the conductor shows up with the leader of that stage performance, and they've been invited to perform in the Little Palace. The only issue is they just lost their number one performer. And this wasn't an accident. The conductor, thinking that the whole blueprint plan wasn't going to work, had actually sabotaged the performance so this would happen. And luckily for Kaz and his group, they have a perfect replacement in Inej. So she gets up there and she kills it. The guy in charge tells her that she has saved the performance. But Jesper tells him, hey, we're kind of a package deal. But the performance leader says, well, there's no free rides. You're going to have to show me something. So Jesper shows off his marksmanship, and that's going to get him in. But Kaz doesn't really have that type of talent, so he tells everybody, I'll find my own way. Don't worry about me. But remember, they need this plan because of the fact that Nina is MIA. And they aren't the only ones looking for her, because Kurgan is also on the hunt. He calls in one of the guys that was actually escorting Alina to the palace, and he tells him that Nina's been on a priority mission for Kurgan, but she hasn't checked in a while. So he figures that if she's alive, she probably needs their help. And the Grisha says, well, knowing her, she's very much alive. She's one of the best in the Second Army. And she is indeed alive, but just like the conductor had suspected, she's on a slave ship over to Fjerda. And the guy who actually had gotten her tied up comes down and tries to offer her some food for some information. Because when she was initially arrested, she said out loud that the man that she works for will hunt him down. And he figures that she's talking about Kurgan. So he came wanting to get information on him, but she doesn't give any up, telling him that she'd rather starve than be a traitor. But this ship is going through some pretty bad weather, to the point where the captain of the ship goes to the guy that was questioning Nina. His name is Matthias, and he tells Matthias, if it gets really bad, kill the captives. The last thing we want is for one of them to get loose when we're taking on water, because some Grisha can manipulate water. Matthias, though, does not want to be a murderer. Thanks for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to this channel. Like the video if you liked it. Hit thumbs down if you don't. Be nice in the comments section. Nasty comments hurt my feelings. I work hard on these. If I make a mistake, it happens. If you don't see the next video up in the end screen, it'll be up soon. Sharing is caring. Put it on your MySpace page or your away message. And check out my podcast, Scene Invaders, wherever you listen to podcasts.